seconds.
The UN Security Council has called for a ceasefire in hostilities between Palestinians and Israelis. The Council has expressed serious concern about the welfare and protection of civilians on both sides.
Meantime, the federal government is urging any Australians in the Gaza Strip to make arrangements to depart immediately.
There is no such thing as a surgical strike, even with Israel's modern arsenal, especially in Gaza's densely packed towns and refugee camps. This morning, neighbours were digging in the rubble for Suha Abu Sada. She was killed along with one other woman just after dawn in an Israeli airstrike. The missile cut through reinforced concrete. Suha's sister identified her. Suha had multiple handicaps. This was a home for the disabled. Then someone said the Israelis had warned another attack was coming. We heard a rocket and took cover. But it was Hamas firing into Israel. At the mortuary, Suha's brother Yusuf waited for her funeral. He showed us his sister's body. How many of the people killed so far are civilians, he said, and how many are terrorists? And they're not terrorists, they're resistance, and we're proud of them. Suha Abu Sada's funeral was quiet, like her life. The United Nations says that 77% of the Palestinians killed in this campaign were civilians. Belligerents are obliged under the laws of war to protect civilians. The UN has already asked whether Israel is working in the way that it should to fulfill those obligations. After the attack on the Centre for the Disabled, it is clear that the Israelis have some serious questions to answer. So do Hamas about their attacks. Both sides say they're protecting their people.
Well, as the humanitarian situation in Gaza worsens, local hospitals are reporting they're being overwhelmed with casualties. Osama Duma is with the charity Save the Children, and he's in Gaza and spoke with us earlier this morning. Here's some of what he had to say. The webcam connection was not of perfect quality.
The situation for the medical supplies is in a very tricky area. Many of the medical items and medical disposables are out of stock. The military operation is taking place already within the blockade that is imposed on Gaza since 7 years, meaning that the Gaza Strip was already in bad need for medical supplies and medical disposables, and that's why we can say that the hospitals in Gaza are overwhelmed with the amount of injuries and deaths that they are receiving on a daily basis, especially in light of the blockade.
From Israel's point of view, it's trying to hit the militants. To what degree are you seeing civilians coming through the hospitals?
According to the numbers that we have been tracking and also collecting, 77% of the casualties were civilians. We are talking about one of the highest populated areas on Earth. Again, the use of explosive weapons is the main reason for this high casualties among civilians, including children and women.
Osama Damo there from Save the Children. For more on the story, I'm joined by Gabriel Sassoon, the foreign media advisor to Israel's deputy speaker. He joins us from Tel Aviv via webcam. Gabriel Sassoon, as an Australian there, what do you make of the situation?
Well, this seems to me as an Australian like as if Jamaat, the local version of Jamaat Islamiyah, like the Bali bombers had rockets and missiles made, designed by the Syrians and the Chinese, and they were firing at Australian cities. It's kind of how it's felt to me, and I bore the brunt of it today and over the last week as well.
In the meantime, the death toll in Gaza has continued to climb, and the injury and death toll is much heavier on the Palestinian side than it is on the Israeli side. Is this strategy of unleashing Israel's might on Gaza the right one, particularly when it's attracting so much international criticism, not just on the Palestinian side, but also on Israel?
Well, look, I've been consulting with the Labor-led opposition here, so I've got no need to shill for the government. I think there's a two-pronged solution that's necessary. A diplomatic solution on the one hand, and the Labor opposition leader has said that he would immediately go to Ramallah and speak with President Abbas, who everyone has said is a moderate and a serious man of peace. On the other hand, as the leader of the Labor opposition here also said, he would hit Hamas hard. And I think the problem of proportionality, Jeremy, that you brought up is a false one because, the Hamas is deliberately targeting rockets at cities, which is one of the highest war crimes, and they're targeting Israeli civilians. The Israeli army, from my point of view, is targeting, everyone admits, every commentator knows that they're targeting Hamas terrorists, and the Hamas terrorists have openly called for the use of civilians as human shields.
How useful is that talk of targeting when there are so many civilians ending up in Palestinian hospitals?
Well, again, I think that, look, I have no interest in, doing PR for the government here, but the way, from my perspective, that you can only blame one party for that. That's Hamas. They started this war. They're firing rockets. On a daily basis, there's 200 rockets. If Australians were receiving, Sydney and Melbourne were being hit by 200 rockets on a daily basis, Australians would demand some sort of response as well. It's a tragedy when there's civilian deaths, but the only party that can be blamed for that is Hamas, which strategically uses civilians as human shields. And they know that the media will always ask this question of, is that proportionate? 100 Palestinians dead and, no Israelis dead or only one or two Israelis dead? Well, Israel's defenses are very good. That's a great thing. The question is, how many Israelis have to die before the media says, well, that's a proportionate response, fair enough. You should attack, you can do whatever you want.
Well, how many Palestinians have to die before the proportional response is deemed adequate on the Israeli side?
I think that I don't think that's the question. I think the question is, when is Hamas going to stop attacking Israeli civilians? 5 million, which is more than half the population, have been going to bomb shelters. Yesterday morning and about 3 hours ago, I had to run to a bomb shelter twice within 5 minutes of each other, like 5 million out of only a population of 8 million. Try and put that in Australian context. I grew up in Australia. I lived there for 26 years or 28 years of my 34. I can't possibly imagine us living like that. So I do agree with you. The casualties must stop on both sides. A ceasefire has to be reached. The Egyptians need to be brought in to mediate a ceasefire, and they've been missing in action because there's no love lost between the Egyptians and Hamas, who they view as the Palestinian arm of the Muslim Brotherhood, and they would like nothing more than to see further pounding of Hamas. By the way, Jeremy, I would caution you to regard any Hamas figures of civilian casualties in the Strip with some degree of caution. I think you'll find that the Israelis are targeting military facilities and weapons caches, and unfortunately, sometimes in war there are civilian casualties, and that is unfortunate.
All right, Gabriel, Sassoon, we'll have to leave it there, but thank you for your perspective from Tel Aviv this morning.
Jeremy, great pleasure. Thank you.
The diagnosis and treatment of medical conditions could soon be based on your unique DNA code.